Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today we're going to be talking about just the overall crypto market, focusing specifically on Bitcoin because right now Bitcoin still kind of is leading the way. We're seeing Bitcoin dominance still quite high compared to the rest of the market, over 50%, actually even getting closer to 60% than 50%. So Bitcoin dominance still very much kind of in control, Bitcoin leading the market, all that type of stuff. But what we can see is Bitcoin's actually broken recent all-time highs. This is huge news. We're also seeing some crazy news coming from Coinbase as well. This is something that I think is both encouraging, also maybe a little bit discouraging for me as well, and we'll get to that here in a minute as well. We're seeing some crazy news coming out of Coinbase. There's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about today, so let's go ahead, dive right in and not waste any more time. Starting out, I did want to take a look at crypto bubbles though, just so we can get an overall sense of what things are looking like over the past day. We can see Fartcoin and Trump down kind of the biggest. Those have been kind of the two meme coins that have had the most movement within the past, and let's say several weeks. Trump obviously being within the past couple of days. Trump coin has seen a ridiculous amount of volume on Solana. We actually just made a video last night talking about Solana and talking about the value and just the ridiculous volume and fees and revenue, all this type of stuff that this whole Trump coin situation has brought to the Solana ecosystem. So still some crazy stuff going on there. We can see Radium doing quite well also. So a lot of Solana things kind of leading the market both to the upside as well as the downside. And so things looking pretty good there. If we do take a quick look at our market overview dashboard, we can see several different things. Again, with respect to Bitcoin specifically, if we look at open interest and volume, we have reached new all-time highs in open interest. Things looking really good there. Also volume massive. I think this is actually the highest volume day we've seen. Yeah, this is the highest volume day we've seen on Bitcoin, I think ever. So we've seen $223 billion of volume on Bitcoin just today. Really crazy stuff. There was a ridiculous amount of volatility and volume and a whole bunch of stuff going on during Trump's inauguration and a lot of that different type of stuff. We can also see on the RSI heat map, things looking a little bit interesting because we can actually see the majority of the market sitting on weak, some even sitting in on oversold. Basically, the only ones we can see here is Bitcoin. We can also see Fartcoin here as well. Fartcoin coming down from way overbought just to strong. Bitcoin also sitting in strong. And then we've got Ray, Sol, and BTC Dom. Those are essentially the only four that we have sitting in strong. Everything else is basically sitting in neutral. And then, like I said, the majority of the market sitting in weak. We can see the market average actually sitting in the weak range as well. So the overall market's still down kind of bad other than Bitcoin because of what we've seen recently, just kind of with how things have been turning out. Also, if we look at the fear and greed index, we can see a 76 sitting pretty firmly in the greed, which I feel like sounds about right, even though we have seen the altcoin market sitting down so tremendously. And also, last but not least, we can see on the Bitcoin exchange liquidation map a favored move to the upside to liquidate shorts, just because that's at least what we're seeing on the 1 day. If we look at the 7 day, we can actually see an opposite move favored going to the downside to liquidate longs. So given what we are seeing right now, I don't think that there's too much confluence as to where the market's going to go, meaning that the market is probably going to go both ways, but which way it goes first, I don't actually know. And so this is when it becomes really dangerous to trade. We are going to focus a little bit more on liquidations later on in the video, just because liquidations are super important. I know I harp on liquidations constantly, but you have to think like the people kind of controlling the market are also the people who make the money based on people getting liquidated, right? So as you can imagine, there's probably a little bit of a conflicting interest there, and their interest would be to liquidate people because that's what makes them the most amount of money. And so we always have to keep that in mind. That's why I harp on liquidation so much. If you've been following for the past several months, if you haven't been and you're kind of tuning into my channel for the first time, just go take a look back over the past several months as we look at the liquidation maps and liquidation charts. You'll see we've been pretty spot on basically the whole time. And so there is a reason, at least in my opinion, that we pay such close attention to the liquidation maps, because I do think they can tell us with very high levels of accuracy which direction the market is going to go. When is a little bit more the trick that we'll talk about and that we always are constantly talking about in the daily updates. And so obviously if you are wanting to pay attention and stay tuned for all these daily updates, just hit the subscribe button below and also turn on the notification bell so you can see when we are coming out with those new videos. Moving on, I want to take a quick look at the Bitcoin price movement, because as you can see, some pretty crazy price movement happening over the past couple of days. And so we are looking at hourly candles. Let's actually switch out to daily just so we can see. We'll also actually move to full screen. We can see obviously over the past several weeks and even just several days, we've seen a massive amount of volatility in the market. Some insane wicks coming out both here on the 5th of December. We can see an insane wick here on the 13th of January, and then also here on the 20th of January. So tons of volatility coming everywhere. We can see kind of between this like 91 and even now like $108,000 range, we've seen a ton of volatility and a ton of movement just kind of one direction or the other. So I think the main reason for this is because they're just trying to liquidate people. There's not a whole bunch of certainty of what's going on in the market. As we can imagine, this $100,000 range is a very, very like volatile point. And so we can see, sometimes it comes above, but then it kind of struggles and comes back below, and then it kind of bounces between like 190, and then maybe it comes up a little bit. There's just a whole bunch of stuff. As you can even see right now, we're sitting at 102,000, but even in the past 3 days, we've seen wicks as low as 99,000 and as high as almost 110,000. So, we have a very, very hard time holding above this $100,000 mark. It's been kind of a pretty like big point of both support and resistance. And so right now we are obviously holding above that. Whether we keep it and stay there, really hard to say for sure. But as you can see, we do have this kind of large level of liquidity indicated by this top box. We're sitting within this top box right now. And so we'll have to see, how Bitcoin price holds. But as we can see, things looking overall pretty decent. We are sitting kind of towards the upper end of the Bollinger Bands, not outside. So I don't think there's any sort of like major move or like major indications of future moves. We can also see RSI is sitting at 58. So again, kind of in like that mid range. Everything on Bitcoin is kind of like nothing's setting up too particularly strongly one way or the other. Obviously, we can look into some of these more like obscure metrics and things like that to try and find maybe some things like that. The biggest thing, I usually try not to get too involved with those just because I do feel like the signal can kind of get separated from the noise pretty quickly. The thing I would take a look at here is it does look like we maybe have a little bit of an uptrend forming here, just like we had a little bit of that downtrend that we then broke out of. It does seem like we might be following a little bit of an uptrend cycle here. If that is the case, obviously, we would see us returning to previous all-time highs, actually recent all-time highs. Let's actually move this up to like this range. We would see us returning there probably somewhere around like the beginning of February. Again, if we were to follow this like trend line to the upside. There's a ton of bullish sentiment going on just with the inauguration of Trump and having the most pro-crypto both president as well as Congress in the US that we've ever seen. And so there's a ton of optimism and speculation surrounding what that could do. Because of that, there's a ton of volatility and there's also a ton of volume. And so we need to kind of be careful and keep up to date with what's going on within the market because things can change on a dime. I do think there's going to be a lot of pro-crypto legislation and regulation and a lot of that type of stuff coming in, which I do think could send Bitcoin so much higher. I think a lot of the calls that I've seen for highs this cycle are between 140 to 160, 140 on the low end, 160 being about average. And then I have even seen some coming in around like the 180 range. Those are kind of the most consistent and the ones that I think are probably most realistic. I have seen some come in of, 250, 300, 400, $500,000 Bitcoin, things like that. I'm not going to say it's not possible, but I do think that it would be very, very challenging to do just because like that's a huge market cap. And so a ton of money would have to pour in. I think for us to see something like $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 Bitcoins, we would need to see essentially kind of like a national level scramble to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. You think if the US comes out with this Bitcoin strategic reserve, and then maybe China wants to come out with one, and then maybe Russia does, and then maybe Saudi Arabia does, and then maybe like the EU does, or certain EU countries, and then as everybody's just trying to buy as much Bitcoin as they possibly can. That's the way in which I think that we would see prices come to that high. If we don't see kind of like that said, like all in national scramble, probably not going to see it this cycle. Now, again, that doesn't change that we could see that longer term, but at least for this cycle, I think kind of the 140 to 180 range, at least in my mind, seems the most reasonable. But obviously, this is not financial advice. You need to make your own decisions and kind of come to your own conclusions on that. Now, if you are looking to trade Bitcoin or Ethereum or XRP or anything else for that matter, feel free to use my link in the description below for BTCC. I do have that 10% bonus on first-time deposits, so it's basically free money. If you like free money, use the link in the description below and get signed up. They also do have the extra bonuses of up to $10,055 per user, so they are throwing a ton of money at you to trade with them if that is something you're looking for. It's been around for 13 years, so you don't need to worry about them like kind of just disappearing. Obviously, it's crypto, anything can happen, but they've got a really strong track record, so that seems pretty low to me. 300 plus crypto futures, 500x leverage, and I never use leverage this high, but if you have something that works for you, you're more than welcome to do that. And also no VPN or KYC necessary. They also do have spot exchanges too if you don't like to do leverage. I know there's a ton of people who maybe don't really understand it, or maybe they just don't even like to tempt fate and trade leverage, and so they kind of stay away from that. If that's the case, you can totally just use spot. So anyway, go ahead, click that link in the description below if you are looking for a new place to trade. Now moving on, I want to show you the really bullish news that we are seeing from Coinbase. Coinbase jumped from 193rd to 21st on the US App Store leading up to President Trump's inauguration. So I think there's a ton of people trying to get into crypto. I think this is usually one of the like top check metrics that we do have. It's not like first, or like I would say maybe top 5. So I think we've still got some room to run there. But what we are seeing is retail is coming in force to the crypto scene. And so I do think we might start to see some pretty wild movement within crypto, and especially with like volume and volatility, a lot of that type of stuff. And that kind of leads me into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is Bitcoin or just liquidations in general. We can see over the past 24 hours, Bitcoin has been obviously the most liquidated at $326 million, which is crazy. But obviously there's a lot more in here. We are going, in my opinion, to continue to see this rise. We can see 24-hour liquidations at $750 million. This is down almost 36% from the previous 24-hour period, which means it was well over $1 billion the previous 24 hours, which is ridiculous numbers. And keep in mind, we just talked about how Coinbase went from 193rd to 21st. So there's about to be a whole bunch more money jumping into the crypto ecosystem. And so I think, we could potentially be seeing regular occurrences of $1 billion, $2 billion, maybe even $3 billion days where we're seeing liquidations happening, which means obviously the volume here, we're at $488 billion in volume, down 5% only. So not too bad overall, but I think we're going to be seeing just a ridiculous amount of money moving through the crypto ecosystem. As we can see, focusing back in on liquidations, we can see $750 million liquidated in the past 24 hours, 502 million of it on longs and 248 on shorts. Again, the longs usually get liquidated like this because we did see Bitcoin make a run up. We did see it touch a new all-time high. Usually when that happens, people are like, oh my gosh, it's breaking out, price discovery, it's going to go to $1 million a coin, and then it comes down and people get liquidated because people get too bullish. So that's kind of, I think, what we're seeing here. Usually we can actually see the single largest liquidation is $12.5 million, which is absolutely wild. Going a little bit further down, you can see, Ethereum second, kind of the cumulative others being third, and then Trump and Melania and Solana kind of being the next following 3, which again makes a lot of sense because we have seen just a ton of movement and volume on those. So a little bit interested to see that here. So moving on, I think the next point will be best indicated using this liquidation heat map. The liquidation heat map is a little bit interesting because it will show you essentially where kind of the best estimate of liquidations are. So as we can see, coming back to about Christmas, we've been kind of moving around, and again we just look, we start to accumulate a wall of liquidations up here, price moves up. Okay, now we start to see a little bit of a wall of liquidations going here. Now we move down, and then we start to see walls to the upside, liquidated. Then we see a little bit of a pull down, get people to think things are getting bearish, and then we go up, oh, liquidated. This is the type of stuff that we see. Essentially, like price goes down, people think things are getting bearish, so they start doing shorts. And then the market comes around and liquidates all the shorts that were just placed. And so we can see through this heat map, even over here, we could see, a really strong top. We saw a ton of rejection and resistance up at this like 102,000 range. Here, that's even just a couple weeks ago on the 7th of January. This was after we moved up past this like previous high of just over 100K, liquidated a ton of people here. And then obviously, we kind of bounce around. And then recently we come out, liquidate all these people. So as you can see, there's just a ton of movement, even with this dip where we saw this liquidation wick kind of take all of this leverage out. Tons of movement coming down, liquidating a whole bunch of people. And so this is essentially, hopefully you can see, like this is just the money-making machine that all of these exchanges are playing. We can see very clearly where all of this money is getting liquidated, and this is all going into the pockets of the market makers, the people who are kind of influencing the market. And so one thing that we have to be very careful about, again going back to like the Bitcoin chart for example, we have to be very careful of these people moving and manipulating the market, because while they may not be able to send Bitcoin down to 50K or whatever, right? I mean, they have the ability to move it from 95 to 89 and then move it right back up. I mean, that's something that is doable, especially if it's coordinated by some of these large whales that have money and the ability to kind of move this type of stuff. And so we need to just be very, very careful when we're trading in situations like this, just because we're essentially trading against other people, but we're also trading against the market makers as well. So you have to be very, very careful when we are trading. When we're in a zone like this and there's no real clear direction on the market, we just need to be very, very careful to make sure that we're not over trading, because again, wicks happen just to liquidate people. Movements happen that are unexpected and maybe technically, like from a technical analysis perspective, shouldn't happen, but they do anyway, because again, the markets are being manipulated, in my opinion. And so you just have to, if you have that in mind and you understand that like that is an outcome that is happening and it's an option, you can trade very differently. And I think it helps a lot kind of keeping that in the back of your mind. And so anyway, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and a subscribe, because it really, really does help me out. I do daily crypto content. So if you're looking to kind of stay up to date with all the crypto happenings and things going on within the market, as we start to see this market continue to heat up, I think 2025 is going to be an amazing year for crypto. So if you are wanting to stay updated daily on what's going on, just feel free to hit that like and that notification bell as well, so you are notified whenever I do release a new video. And then also, if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, just feel free to drop those in the comment section below. I do really, really like to respond to all of the different comments and things that I get in the comment section. You guys have a lot of really great and interesting takes. I do learn a lot from all you guys. So if you have anything that you want to leave in there, that's also very greatly appreciated. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.